Hey everybody, my name is Cydney and I am going to talk a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey, and most importantly I want to share my experience with knowing when to surrender and when to keep fighting when you're trying to grow your business. I want to share my experience with divine timing and a little bit about why I think in the beginning it wasn't working for me. So I decided to become an entrepreneur 4 years ago. I went through an energy healing certification, and that was when I started my journey into becoming a life coach. And it was about 3 years of like paycheck to paycheck energy. I remember I had to pay my car payment multiple months by going negative into my checking account. I was spending a lot of money on other people to tell me how to make money. So a lot of other business coaches, marketing coaches, copywriters, anything that I could in order to succeed. I was hungry for 3 years. My light never dimmed. Now I did a lot of things wrong. And I won't necessarily go into all of the things that I did wrong, but I think the biggest thing that I did wrong was I wasn't listening to my body through the whole experience. So when someone comes to me now and they're in a similar spot to me as I was, and they're feeling like, they've been trying and their money's maxed out and things are really stressful and they don't know if they've made the right choice or if this path is meant for them, usually I give the advice to surrender, because for me, I had fought for 3 years straight trying to, I know I launched a retreat that was pretty successful, but that was really all the success I had in 3 years, and I had a whole lot of debt and not a lot to show for it. And I was fighting the idea of surrendering, which for me, surrendering looked like putting the business down, getting a job, being able to pay my bills, being able to have some sort of security. That felt like not an option. I felt like I had to push through. I had to prove to myself that this was going to work. It was going to work. It was right around the corner. It's going to work. Funny enough, when I was a little girl, I found myself in a similar situation where I started walking back. Me and my family were all camping, and we were all like walking around the trees, and I started to walk back to our four-wheelers and bikes and things like that, and I walked the wrong direction. I was probably 7 at this time, and I started walking into desert by myself, and I kept saying, just behind this tree, the bikes will be there. Just behind this tree, the bikes will be there. And the bikes were never there, and I managed to walk myself an hour and a half away from my family in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and I had to sit down and hope that my family found me. Now, obviously they did, but that mindset of like, it's just around the corner, I swear it's just around the corner, became very, very dangerous. And I think that on top of that, when you're hearing a lot of people talk about manifestation, and if you visualize it and don't have a negative thought, because then, you're trying too hard and it's going away and you have to be unattached in order for it to come true, all of those things were really toxic for me in this moment, because they were asking me to abandon what my body was telling me. And I found myself really having shame or judgment whenever I would feel attached, because at the end of the day, I think it is almost impossible to be unattached to the outcome when you are hemorrhaging in debt and you don't know how you're going to pay your bills. If your basic needs of survival, your food, water, and shelter, are not being taken care of properly, it's very impossible to just be unattached and trust the money's coming. And I stayed in that loop for 3 years. And then finally I decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to put it down and I'm going to get a job. And once I had put down this business, my whole life, I want to say crumbled, but in a really beautiful way. My whole life did fall apart. And I had realized that those 3 years that I was obsessive about my business, I was dreaming about it, I was working on it at 3 a.m. I couldn't think about anything other than my business. I wasn't able to let it go. I was always thinking about, how can I improve? How can I be better? How can I get results? How can I get clients? It was a constant loop for 3 years straight. That once I had decided to put it down, I had a lot more space for my life to happen, Cydney's life, my reality. I was living in this manifestation and this future that I really wanted, but what I wasn't realizing was my present life in the place to actually support those manifestations. And sure enough, once I set it down and I decided to be present and look at what I had now, I realized a lot of things weren't working. So very quickly after I put down my business and I decided to start applying for jobs, I got separated from my husband. We ended up divorcing the next year. I ended up coming out as gay. I ended up doing van life for a little while, and I ended up moving out of the state. And my life really took a complete 180 different path. One day I woke up with a husband and a home and a plan and a dream. And then the next day I woke up with nothing. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know I was single. I didn't have a partner anymore. And I had no work, no job, nothing. And what I found was, because I was so distracted in this like grind, this goal, this 10K month kind of archetype that's been built around us in this online space. If you're in the coaching community, if not, that's a thing. Like trying to hit this income goal, trying to, retire your husbands and trying to become financially free so you can travel anywhere you want is so beautiful. But what I didn't realize was that the universe was like pausing and stopping me from that happening, because it turns out I wasn't meant to retire my husband. I wasn't meant to have a husband at all. And a lot more things in my life needed to fall into place and domino into place before business was anything that was going to take off, in my opinion. So what I'm trying to say with this is, we all have our own timeline. We all have our own divine timing. And the most ironic thing about all this is, as soon as I set it down and I truly surrendered and I did the thing that I needed to in order to have security, which was get a job to where I could pay my bills and I could breathe and I could save and I could go to Target and I could get myself clothes and I could live my life. 2 months later, I signed a really, really big contract as a virtual assistant. And from then on, I have been self-employed and I have been very, very successful in that. And I have had so much financial freedom, and I've been able to travel. I think at the end of this year, I've traveled to a new state every single month. I have a lot of abundance in my life, and it's entrepreneurial abundance, and it's everything that I ever dreamed for. But I was so focused on it having to look like the container that I wanted it to be in, that I was losing track of what reality was, and what needed to happen was I needed to look at my life and I needed to notice, okay, where are the sticky points? What's reality? Not what's the future? What am I working towards? But what's reality? Well, reality is you can't pay your bills. You can't feed yourself. Reality is you're unfulfilled in your marriage. Reality is that you need to come out. I had a lot of adventures to go on within myself, and I wasn't listening to those things. And so I really encourage people, if they're going through a time, whether it's in an entrepreneurial journey, or whether it's in their career or their relationships, if they're feeling very, very focused on future, what we're going to get to this, I encourage you just to pause and notice what reality is, and take little tiny baby steps to try and come into your truth. And a big thing for me was, it's very hard to be able to hear your inner self when your basic needs of survival are not being met. So that is why it was so powerful and potent for me to get a job, even if it was only for 2 months before, my success kind of boomed. It allowed me the space to stop thinking about, how am I going to pay my car payment? Oh my gosh, my credit's probably wrecked. I need to pay this credit card off so that my husband doesn't get upset with me. Like, all of those thoughts silenced. They disappeared out of my mind. I all of a sudden had clarity and more room to explore and come up with new ideas and listen and hear what needed to happen for me and for my life in order to be fulfilled. And so if you're finding your mind to be really, really busy, especially if it's really busy financially and you've got a lot of financial concerns, I recommend trying to make changes and take steps in order for you to have just 1% more security, just something that you can do, limiting expenses, moving back home, getting a new job, even if that sounds terrifying, putting down the armor and being able to surrender to what your current reality is was the best thing that I ever did for myself. Now, it was also the hardest thing I've ever done for myself. And like I said, I started my business wanting to be a life coach, and now I've ended up becoming a virtual assistant, lead generation specialist, and a business coach. So ironically enough, life has taken me in a completely different space. I was in energy healing, and now I'm in marketing. So those things, I believe, wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have allowed myself to put down the armor and to listen and to kind of go through life and let life show me where I needed to go, rather than me trying to constantly micromanage and tell life where I wanted it to go. And so I just encourage you, if you're in a rough spot, to just surrender, let life interact with you, be curious about what life is showing you, be curious about the opportunities or the things that you are notice what you're curious about in general, and let life tell you where you need to go for a little while. If I would have done that sooner, I probably would be where I'm at sooner, but I believe in divine timing, and I believe everything happening for a reason. And I believe that no matter how many amazing business coaches I invested in at that time, it was never going to happen for me, because I had a lot of other steps that I needed to tend to. I was never going to manifest retiring my husband, because I didn't realize that I needed to leave him. So all of these things are important, and it's important that when we have a goal, and usually I think it's very, especially when it's attached to accomplishment and success with career goals, it can be really important to not get lost in that, and to come back to yourself, and to welcome yourself back home, and to listen, and to, tend to your personal world for a little while, and surrender and get the job. And something for me too that was important was finding a job that was fulfilling, finding a job that rose my vibration, because my vibration was smashed on the ground because I was constantly stressed about how I was going to, put gas in my car. And so being able to take care of yourself and tend to yourself is not a step back. It is actually something that can really slingshot you forward. And it was the truth for me. It was like a good 6 months of deconstruction of my life, and I worked 2 months at a new job, as a federal job, as a great job, and then all of a sudden it was like click. I had this idea and I just tried it out, and then I've never looked back since. But I wouldn't have had that space to get there if I didn't take the time to tend to myself and get my bills paid and pay off the debt, find my house where I was gonna live, separate from my husband, come into my truth, and come out as queer, and go on some adventures that my life and my soul was yearning to go on before, the business thing took off. So I guess the number one thing that I could say here is, if you're struggling, put down the armor, surrender, and you don't have to be the one who knows what the next step is all the time, and just being curious about where life wants to guide you, and letting life interact with you, and letting life tell you for a little while what needs to happen, and kind of just letting it happen, and being present, and not forcing anything, and not putting any pressure or strings attached to anything, and just letting it be how it needs to be, and just noticing what you notice, and just being present with that, and dropping it, and just letting it be, is some of the most potent medicine I have ever given myself, and has been the thing that I think led me to the success that I have now, and led me to have the capacity that I have now in order to really be able to hold this success. It's supporting a life that I built, that I genuinely love, not a life that I built that I thought I was supposed to build. So that's my story. I am sending lots of love to anyone who might be struggling in their entrepreneurial journey, or their careers, or even their relationships. I've been there. I'm someone that you can always reach out to and ask any questions. I really love to answer questions around entrepreneurship, but also especially around coming out, questioning your sexuality, especially while being married to a cis man. And and what that journey looked like for me. So please don't be afraid to reach out or connect with me. My Instagram is Cydney, Cydney, Webster, Webster. You can find me there and ask me any questions or reach out. I'm here to support you. And then, of course, Sierra and Jessica are amazing humans. I've worked very closely with them, and I really recommend being in their container if possible. Thanks for listening, everyone.